Welcome to Talesfromworld, where magic comes to life in every tale. Lovely kids, today's story is about Pippi Longstocking. Once upon a time, in a quaint and peaceful little village, there was a house unlike any other. It was Villekulla, a charming and colorful home that looked as though it had been plucked from a child's dream. It stood at the edge of town, surrounded by trees, and it was here that a most extraordinary girl lived. Her name was Pippi Longstocking, and she was no ordinary child. Pippi was 9 years old, with bright red hair that she wore in two tight braids that stuck out from her head like wings. Her face was sprinkled with freckles, and she wore a dress that she had made herself. One side was blue, the other side was red, and both sides were too short. Her shoes were twice as long as her feet, and she always wore long stockings, one brown, the other black. Pippi had a sense of style that was all her own. Pippi lived alone in Villekulla, but she was never lonely. She had a monkey named Mr. Nilsson, who wore tiny blue pants and a straw hat, and a horse that she called Little Old Man. The horse lived on the porch because, according to Pippi, the kitchen was too small for him. Pippi had moved into Villekulla after her father, Captain Ephraim Longstocking, was lost at sea. Captain Longstocking was a pirate and a king of a South Sea island, and he had left Pippi a suitcase filled with gold coins. Pippi was fiercely independent and used the gold coins to buy anything she needed, though she didn't need much. Pippi's neighbors, Tommy and Annika were the first to meet her. They were ordinary children who lived in an ordinary house with their ordinary parents. They were both amazed and delighted by Pippi's extraordinary ways. Pippi introduced herself to Tommy and Annika by walking down the street backwards and with her head held high. She explained that it was the best way to see where you had been. Tommy and Annika quickly became Pippi's best friends, and they were soon swept up in her whirlwind of adventures. Pippi had a wild imagination and an unending supply of stories about her travels with her father. She had been to places like India, Egypt, and the Congo, and she had seen things that no other child had ever seen. Pippi's strength was legendary. She could lift her horse with one hand and had wrestled with the strongest man in the world, and won. She was fearless and often acted on a whim, which led to many extraordinary adventures. One day, Pippi, Tommy, and Annika decided to have a picnic. They packed a basket with sandwiches, cookies, and lemonade and set off to find the perfect spot. Pippi led them to a meadow filled with wildflowers, where they spread out a blanket and began to eat. Pippi entertained Tommy and Annika with stories of her adventures, like the time she had sailed around the world in a hot air balloon or when she had discovered a treasure chest buried on a deserted island. After lunch, Pippi decided it was time for some fun. She suggested they play a game called Don't Touch the Ground, where they had to move from one spot to another without touching the ground. Pippi climbed a tree with ease and swung from branch to branch like a monkey. Tommy and Annika did their best to keep up with her, but they soon found themselves laughing and falling to the ground. Pippi's adventures were not always without danger. One day, she invited Tommy and Annika to join her on a trip to the circus. Pippi had never been to a circus before, and she was eager to see what it was all about. When they arrived, Pippi was fascinated by the clowns, the acrobats, and the animals. She watched in awe as the ringmaster introduced the strongest man in the world, Mighty Adolf. Mighty Adolf challenged anyone in the audience to a wrestling match. Pippi couldn't resist the challenge and stepped into the ring. The crowd gasped as this small girl faced off against the enormous man. But Pippi was not intimidated. She grabbed Mighty Adolf and tossed him over her shoulder with ease. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Pippi took a bow, delighted by the applause. Pippi's strength and bravery were matched by her kindness and generosity. She was always willing to help those in need, even if it meant bending the rules. One winter's day, Pippi, Tommy, and Annika were playing in the snow when they heard a cry for help. They followed the sound and found a group of children huddled together, shivering in the cold. They had lost their way and were scared. Pippi took charge, wrapping the children in her warm coat and leading them back to Villekulla. She made a big pot of hot chocolate and gave each child a warm blanket. She told them stories to cheer them up and made sure they were safe and comfortable until their parents arrived to take them home. Pippi's kindness was also evident in her relationship with her animals. Mr. Nilsson and Little Old Man were not just pets, they were her family. Pippi treated them with the same love and respect that she showed to her human friends. She often talked to them as if they could understand her, and in a way, they did. Pippi's unique way of life did not go unnoticed by the adults in the village. Some admired her independence and free spirit, while others were concerned about her unconventional ways. Miss Priscillius, the head of the village children's welfare committee, was particularly worried. She believed that Pippi needed to be taken care of and should be placed in a children's home. One day, Miss Priscillius arrived at Villekulla with 2 police officers. They were there to take Pippi to the children's home. But Pippi had no intention of leaving her beloved home. She outwitted the police officers by climbing onto the roof and performing a series of acrobatic tricks that left them baffled. Eventually, they gave up and left, realizing that Pippi was more than capable of taking care of herself. Pippi's adventures continued throughout the year, each one more exciting than the last. She discovered a secret cave filled with treasures, helped a group of school children stand up to a bully, and even hosted a grand party at Villekulla. Pippi's parties were legendary, filled with laughter, games, and delicious food. Tommy and Annika were always the guests of honor, and they loved every minute of it. As the seasons changed, so did Pippi's adventures. In the spring, she planted a garden filled with flowers and vegetables. In the summer, she built a tree house and invited Tommy and Annika to join her for sleepovers under the stars. In the fall, she organized a scavenger hunt that took them all over the village, solving riddles and finding hidden treasures. And in the winter, she built the most magnificent snowman the village had ever seen. One day, a letter arrived at Villekulla. It was from Captain Longstocking. He had been rescued and was on his way home. Pippi was overjoyed. She couldn't wait to see her father again and share all her adventures with him. Tommy and Annika were excited too, eager to meet the man who had inspired Pippi's incredible stories. When Captain Longstocking finally arrived, he was greeted with a grand celebration. The entire village came to welcome him home. Pippi introduced him to Tommy, Annika, and all her friends. Captain Longstocking was proud of his daughter and delighted by her adventures. He decided to stay in the village for a while, and together, he and Pippi planned new adventures that would take them to places they had only dreamed of. And so, Pippi Longstocking continued to live her extraordinary life, filled with laughter, friendship, and adventure. She taught everyone in the village that it was okay to be different, that kindness and courage could overcome any obstacle, and that the world was a wonderful place, full of magic and wonder. As the stars twinkled above Villekulla and the night grew still, Pippi would often look out her window and think about all the adventures yet to come. And she would smile, knowing that she was never alone, for she had her friends, her family, and her boundless imagination. Dear children, Pippi would say with a twinkle in her eye, remember to always be brave, kind, and curious. And don't forget to subscribe to my friend's channel, Tales from World, for more magical stories and adventures. Together, we'll explore new worlds and make wonderful memories. Good night and sweet dreams. And with that, Pippi Longstocking drifted off to sleep, ready for whatever adventures awaited her in the morning.